Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to help you with the Graphing the Atmosphere assignment for those of you who could not attend school to do it in class with Mr. Skinner. Please feel free to pause the video whenever you need to as you go along. You should have picked up a piece of graph paper. You can either print it out from the online links. You might have picked one up here at school, but you're going to need a piece of graph paper, and this is the one that I provided here at school. You should also have the Graphing the Atmosphere instruction sheets, which you can print out or you can just view it online. You don't actually need this piece of paper. You can have just look at the instructions online. I'm going to be following those word for word, even if you can't see them on the screen all the time. The other thing you're going to need is a couple of colored pencils. The colors really don't matter. I have a black one specifically for writing certain things, but then I've got 3 other colors. You'll probably need more than that eventually, but the main portion of this, you just need these. So I'm following the instructions, like I said. The first instruction is to create an X and Y axis on a full sheet of graph paper. My graph paper is set up so that I've got an open edge right here that allows me to mark the X-axis and the Y-axis. I'm doing the Y first, obviously. Okay. Nice and dark. Okay. And then I'm going to do my X-axis. And it leaves this little open edges right here so that I can mark the measurements as they go along. Very easily with the pre-made tick marks. So I've got my nice little dark X and Y axis. Next it says the title goes at the top. Well, the title always tells us what we're going to be graphing, and that is we're going to be comparing altitude to temperature and air pressure in the atmosphere. So that's what I'm going to title this. Nice and high, comparing altitude to temperature and air pressure in the atmosphere. Beautiful, very nice. Next it states to label the y-axis, altitude in kilometers. Okay, and I need to number it starting at 0 to 100, which should take up about 3/4 of the page. So start at 0 down here at the origin, and I've pre-measured and I know how much space. So if you're using my graph paper, we're going to go 10 kilometers at the 3rd tick mark, and every 3 tick marks is going to be another 10 kilometers. So there's 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100. That looks like about 3/4 of the page. I did pretty well, actually. And now I need to create a warp to extend the graph up to 500 kilometers. So what does a warp look like? Well, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. Can't get too close. But right here above 10, I'm going to basically change by creating this little symbol right here, a little lightning bolt. Hey, I'm going to change the scale on the rest of my graph. And so then I'm going to mark 200, 300, 400, 500. Looks like I could keep going, but that's what I've done here to scale it up to 500 like it said. So that's 4 bullets on the page down. My 5th one is I'm going to create x-axis number 1. This is going to be a weird graph. I'm going to have 2 x-axis. I'm going to have an x-axis down here, And I'm going to create another one up here, and I'll talk about that when we get there. But basically, we're going to put two different pieces of data using two different pieces of graphs. And that's why we have two different colors. These two different colors are going to determine what we're actually graphing. So I'm going to switch to my red pencil because it says that we're going to be labeling axis number 1 as temperature, and red seems like an appropriate one for temperature. So the x-axis is temperature in degrees Celsius. So temperature in degrees Celsius right here. Okay. Now we're going to be measuring, it says to mark or to number from negative 100 to positive 30. So instead of starting at 0 for our origin of our graph, again, I told you we'd be doing this a little bit different. We're going to start at negative 100. And based on the spacing, if I want to get to positive 30, I'm going to go, again, every 3 spaces. So this is going to be negative 90, negative 80, negative 70, negative 60, negative 50, negative 40, negative 30, negative 20, negative 10, 0, positive 10, 20, and 30. And it looks like I've got one extra little space, so it looks like I numbered pretty well overall. So that is our first axis, and they're going to serve as part of it. And the reason I did it in red is because now I can use this red when I draw a line and know that my red is referencing this side of the page. I'm going to switch to a different color because my second last bullet here in the L section of the instructions states to make x-axis number 2 at the top. So I'm going to make my x-axis number 2 here at the top. And I can do it all the way at the top of the page. That's fine. It doesn't really matter to me. Okay. And it needs to be in air pressure in millibars, MB. And I'm going to be numbering from 0 to 1,300. So my 0 will be right here on the y-axis. And then it'll be every 3 spots, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 11. Oops, I've been doing this wrong. It should be 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, 1,000, 1,100, 1,200, 1,300. And I'm going to draw another axis up here just so that I can see what I'm doing. It doesn't quite have the same tick marks, but I can line them up the best I can this way. Make it work nice. So it looks like I've got my air pressure ready to go as well. And it does say as the last bullet that since the axes are done in different colors, they can be my key, which means I don't have to create a key. If you don't have 3 colors at home, you're going to need to figure out a way to create a key for what we just did. Okay, continuing our work, we're now in section E of the instructions. And this is where we start doing our equations or our graphing. So the first thing it says is the air pressure line is a steep downward curve. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so we can see more of the page. Okay, the air pressure is a steep downward curve, so we should have something that looks like this. Hey, I'm going to begin at 100 kilometers of altitude, so I'm going to find 100, and that's right up here. And since, again, it's green, since my air pressure was green up here, with the air pressure as close to zero air pressure as possible. So I'm going to basically put a point right there, right next to the axis. Not on the axis, but as close to the axis as I can actually get it. And it's going to end at 0 kilometers, so altitude 0 kilometers. There's 0 kilometers. And it's going to be at a air pressure of 1,200 millibars. So 1,200 millibars is down here. So this is the end. So I'm going to connect these two in a steep downward curve. Oh, but there's one more bullet here. It needs to pass through 2 points. 100 millibars. So 100 millibars lines up right here at 20 kilometers. So this point right here. And 300 millibars, which is right here at 10 kilometers. So I need to make a curve that connects these 4 lines. Let's see how well I can do this. I'll do my best. Draw it kind of light, and I'll darken it after I get it. But it needs to be very steep downward curve that hits all of these points. Well, I did pretty well. I think I can darken that. As straight as I'd like. And I can't really use a ruler because it did say a curve. But I did it okay. So yours should look like that with your green. Did pretty well. Okay, next bullet says the temperature line. Well, the temperature line was done in red, as we can see right here. And it says that it zigzags through the 4 atmospheric layers. So I'm going to be, it says, begin the line at 500 kilometers. Well, 500 kilometers is right here. And the temperature higher than the scale. Okay, well, I'll just start it right out there just for the heck of it. Hey, it's even off my my graph paper. How's that? That works. Okay. And it needs to slope down to negative 90 Celsius, 90 kilometers. Well, let's see. Negative 90 Celsius is right here. 90 kilometers is right there. Negative 90 and 90. So I'm going to be connecting these 2 points right here. And I'll even take it all the way off the page. Try that again. They're pretty good. Oh, but this line wasn't finished. It says a vertical line to negative 90 C, 80 kilometers. Okay, got that. The next thing it says, continue the line to negative 3 Celsius, Well, there's -10, -0. Well, each one of these in between is going to be 3, so that's 3.3. I think that's close enough to the line for me. -3 at 60. Well, here's 60. I'll put it right there. -3 at 60, so I can connect these two. Again, you should be looking at your instructions. I'm just repeating them. And then a vertical line down to 50 kilometers. Here's 50 kilometers. Now, from -3C50, we're going to connect it to -5020. There's -50. 20 kilometers. That's right there. And then we go straight down to -5012. Well, -5012 is going to be just below the 13 mark here. So, going to be right about there. And then from -5012, connecting it to +20, 0. +20, 0. That's right on the x-axis. +20. Woo! Look at all that. Well, I got mine. It's pretty good overall. Hopefully you were able to do yours. Again, make sure that you're pausing and getting yours caught up. Okay, that puts me at section N here for the instructions. Well, what do we notice here? Well, in order to notice what's going on with the temperature and the air pressure in Earth's atmosphere, we need to know where the layers of Earth's atmosphere actually are. So, we're going to follow the bullet, and it says by drawing horizontal lines at the appropriate altitude to mark each layer. Okay, so I'm going to switch to blue, just so that I have one. The troposphere begins at 0 kilometers, that's down here, and it ends at 15 kilometers. Well, 15 is halfway between 10 and 20. So it's about halfway between these two lines. Draw horizontal line. And I'll label this the troposphere. The stratosphere begins at 15. Well, that's the line we already drew. It ends at 45. Well, 45 is halfway between 40 and 50. Same thing. So this is our stratosphere. Our mesosphere begins at 45 and ends at 80. Well, 80 is much easier to get to since it's right on the number. This is our mesosphere. And our thermosphere goes from 80 to around 500 to everything else. Technically, there's an exosphere above it, but we don't spend much time on that, and we don't know enough about it. And the actual edge of the thermosphere and exosphere, it kind of changes based on temperature and various other things that are happening with sunlight. So it's nice. We'll just end here at the thermosphere since we're not really studying the exosphere. And just know that way up here, there would be the exosphere as well. Hey, the last bullet in N states, now read your notes or your textbook and illustrate the layers of the atmosphere by drawing the important events that occur in each layer. So we're going to turn this from a graph into an illustration of the atmosphere. So in the troposphere, if I check my notes, it says that this is the layer that all weather occurs. So I should have a layer with clouds, airlines maybe, okay, but all weather events, raining and tornadoes. And I need to fill this whole layer up with weather illustration so that I remind myself that the troposphere is where weather occurs. Okay, then I need to go to the stratosphere, and it says in my notes for my stratosphere that the stratosphere layers is the gases are layered. And in the stratosphere, there is the ozone layer. And so that is actually one of the warmest layers. So I'm going to basically make this, I'm going to color the stratosphere in layers, maybe a couple of different variations in the color blue, getting darker or lighter as I go up here. And at some point, I'm going to put in an ozone layer, one of the warmer layers. Okay, and I'm going to describe that as, I'm going to label that as the ozone layer. But I'm going to stratify the rest of the layers so it looks like my gases are layered. It doesn't need to be a lot of layers because there's only a couple of main gases in our atmosphere, but I still want to make sure that I put a few of them. Hey, the mesosphere, when I get up here, says in my notes that one of the main events that occurs in the mesosphere is this is where meteors burn up. So I'm going to draw my meteors right here as well. Okay, so I'm going to draw some meteors and shooting stars burning up right here. I'm going to include my ionosphere because the ionosphere, remember, is this zone right here on the border between the mesosphere. And I'm going to label my ionosphere. I'm actually going to change that color so it stands out a little bit different. Put it right here on the line. Ionosphere. And this is where the aurora borealis occurs, or the northern lights. So I might have to look up some pictures of what the northern lights, but I illustrate some auroras happening here on my ionosphere. And in my thermosphere, it says that this is where the International Space Station orbits. It's the upper layer of our atmosphere, so we have satellites and things. So I'm going to make this much darker because there's very little gas. Each one of these layers is probably going to get darker, closer and closer to actual empty space. And I'm going to put my satellite or my International Space Station up here in my thermosphere, along with everything else. So I've now finished the do it and the draw it for my left side. The describe it, there are some questions here at the bottom of the page. So read the instructions and answer those questions on the lined piece of paper, notebook paper, that this page will get glued onto. And then you can glue this page down. Maybe you have it flapped up so that you can read the answers down here on the line paper. Glue this down with all its illustrations, and it'll be ready to be turned in with your notebook or turned into on It's Learning. Thank you.